show where I have a conversation with handpicked leaders from the payments industry. So they chat about how they lead their people, how they build cultures, and ultimately how they have a human-centric approach and embrace the opportunities that are obviously in the payments industry before they embrace the challenges. One of the most accomplished people that I've seen is Renata Kane, who is able to not just realize the potential of her team, but do so whilst realizing the performance and the high performance for organizations. We're connected by our mutual friend, Anna Patel, so we better give him a shout out because we know what he's like. So Renata, obviously you are now Chief Commercial Officer at Just, which has a real mission about the business, which is committed to fighting chargeback for merchants and also and actually winning.
That's right.
Excellent. That's right. So welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the intro, and of course, I must say thank you to Anant for making the introduction. So that's twice for him.
That's twice for him. That's quite enough for him now. Quite enough for him. So I wonder if we could dive straight in, and I wonder if you could share some of the choices that you've made within your career.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can go so many ways with this question. Yeah. The beginning of it is you make a choice that you want to have a career, and I certainly did that. You make a choice that you want to be successful in your career and successful in life. So I feel like that was a conscious decision that I wanted to, have both. And I guess later on, you make a choice, at least I made a choice to be a parent, to be a mother, to seek ways to have balance. There's not always balance. I'll just be very upfront and clear. And really just my desire to be a leader. Those were, I think, all active choices. And yeah, I think about what I do on a daily basis is not so different than what I do, in the evening with my children versus the day with my work. You spend time with people, you seek to have them grow and build. And if they're children, eventually they leave your home. If they're employees or peers, sometimes they leave to do bigger and better things. So I think that, those are the active choices I've made to be part of, both those worlds.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So I know you're obviously a psychology graduate, and I have it on very good authority that you lead with a very human-centric approach. You're ultimately responsible for commercial success at Just. How important is having an empathy with customers? How important it is that when you're trying to create innovative value propositions in this marketplace, which is highly competitive?
Yeah, I think that it's just kind of generally across the board, but in fintech now, with the way the market is, it's even more important. As a startup, you're always looking for product market fit. You're always thinking about how do you onboard a customer? How do you find simple ways to connect and make kind of the journey easy? And if you're not being empathetic about that journey or really understanding it, that's where you'll have a misstep or two. So I think whether you're coming at it from a tech perspective or a commercial or pricing perspective, or just a general experience perspective, empathy is kind of in all of it. I grew up in relationship management. It's way back when that's what we used to call it, right? Now it's customer success. The relationship, and I guess how what you build that relationship on, and the empathy that is, continues to build. That's what the whole relationship is built upon. It's all interconnected. So I think empathy should be part of our jobs every single day.
I'm just really curious there. As you say, it's now called customer success, but it used to be called relationship management. What are the important components for you for a relationship?
It's a great question. It's all about authenticity, right? So, people want to build relationships to have connections and feelings that, they matter to the other person, or that together they can do something. When I think about business and building with others a program whether it's at Just or, other places that I've been, it's that authenticity that kind of disarms people, that allows you to get in. And then it's the creation and the respect that's earned, the empathy, all of it. That to me is how you start to build and grow a relationship.
Wow. So how do you show up? Yeah, I'm just fascinated down this path, if that's okay. How do you show up as authentic then? Because I certainly, when I used to work for a very large organization, it was blue suits, stiff ties, and your identity was sort of a bit of an identikit for you. So how have you grown to the point where you can show up as the true Renata and just say, this is me, and I'm really comfortable with it?
Yeah, I think it's just that. You're a person first, and the person on the other end of your Zoom call or the other end of the phone or across the table for you is a person first. So inquiring about them, and sometimes people don't have time for that these days, right? So when you have the opportunity, I like to understand who it is on the other side. What drives them? What's the reason that they are in the role that they're in, like trying to achieve what they're attempting to achieve? So I think that showing up as yourself is just as important as really knowing who the other person is. And without that, relationships can be very superficial. They can be very transactional, and you don't want that.
Okay. So I could keep on going down this
That's okay.
that relationship path. Because sorry, I'm fascinated with this. Well, I've got a belief, if I can share this with you, is that actually the deeper you go on a relationship and the less transactional it becomes. And so Anna is a wonderful example of this, by the way. Actually, the more commercially beneficial it can be. Whereas if you only ever stay transactional, if you only ever, well, I believe as well, if you're waiting for somebody else to go first in any relationship, you might have a long wait. I was taught that at a very young age. You got any thoughts on that?
I think that's right. I mean, I think it's a lot harder without a relationship. So you could be successful with transactional relationships if you can absolutely be successful, but why make your job harder? Relationships should make it easier. Relationships, not only if I'm thinking about just my work today and in having a sales team close deals, like those relationships that they have should make it easier. But I also think of what made it easy. I shouldn't say easy. What makes it easier for me to build a commercial team at Just? Well, I leaned on people that I've had relationships with for years, that have either been my peers or worked with me or I worked for, and bringing these people together, knowing exactly what they bring, and now empowering them to do this work all together at a new organization. It's all based on relationships.
That's a really good point you make as well. It's not just about customers; it's about building teams and actually recruiting. As an ex-headhunter, recruiting is hard work. It can be hard work.
Yes,
it can be, or it can be less friction. Let's put it like that. Yep.
That's right. That's
wonderful,
right.
Wonderful. So I'm reliably informed you're a leader who is committed to lead with curiosity and also decency. And I wonder where you could tell us where that comes from and what the connection is between curiosity, decency, and commercial success. So 2 questions in one there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love that you have this reliable source. I love that the source exists. But, like we were saying, I'm a relationship person, whether it's a relationship leader or a relationship peer. So yeah, I like to think that I lead with decency or with empathy. Curiosity is one that you don't always think about or call out in this situation.
Okay.
And so, no, I love that you have, because psychology defines curiosity a little bit differently than like if you were just to open the dictionary. And in psychology, it's defined as the impulse or desire to investigate or gather information, particularly when that information is interesting or novel. So if you think about that, and you think about being a leader, and certainly I'm not saying that 17 years of payments and fintech have been interesting or novel, but what I am saying is think about the words that psychology uses to define curiosity. investigating, observing, gathering of information. Those are the attributes of a good leader. And when you come into a new group, as I did with Just, you've got an embedded team. You are coming in, you're observing, you're seeking to understand, and then you're having to synthesize all of this information to think, how can you take action to make it better? And that's the duty of a leader. So I think that you're right on when you say, decency and curiosity, equal, really great achievements in commercial success. You need all that.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, wonderful. I've learned something new today, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So again, I've seen that parallel so often with the best leaders who lead with decency, but also an innate curiosity for their teams, for the industry, for the customers, etc. And it's almost insatiable. However, I find that the best know how to sort of almost box and right size that level of curiosity, not just curiosity for curiosity's sake. I think that direct parallel there with leadership is thank you for sharing on that. Where does that come from though? Did that start with psychology, or has that always been something you've been fascinated with? Or
I think it's more of just wanting to know more. I don't know that it started with psychology. I've just always been, a curious person and wanting to understand how things work, knowing more about people, understanding the industry. I grow slightly bored if I'm not learning. So that's how I keep myself going.
Right. And do you have a deliberate learning plan, or you wake up each day and do that, or how do you play that one?
No, it's not deliberate. But I do try to put myself into situations where I do something that I haven't done before. So like putting yourself into like experiences that open up opportunities to learn.
Sure.
I think I try to do that often, not deliberately, however.
Okay. It happens though. Yeah.
It does happen.
Perhaps happens unconsciously. Yeah. So then, we share a passion for reducing and ultimately surpassing the gender opportunity gap and also the gender pay gap. I wonder if you could share your lens on those two items, because they're linked but they're distinct.
Yeah. So it was not always something that I thought about, and maybe I ignored a little bit. I'll be the first to admit.
Sure.
I always believed you worked hard, you'd get rewarded for it. It didn't matter, gender, age, any of it. Like you worked hard, like, there's input, there's output. And it wasn't until I actually saw it and I actually felt it, that I realized that I was kind of thinking about it all wrong. And I've learned that it's your duty. It's your duty as a person to advocate for yourself, but it's also your duty as a leader to advocate for those around you. I've read that, women on average don't push for promotions nearly as often as men, whether it's for title or salary. Women don't ask for that as often. And it resonated with me. I understood because there were not many times where I advocated for myself in that way. And thankfully, I was lucky along the way. But a few years ago, I had an employee who really taught me a valuable lesson. She was up for a promotion. The people team came to me and said, here's the title, here's the package. At first blush, it looked great. And I was really excited to offer it to my employee. And I did. And before she could really see the numbers or even understand the numbers, she asked me a question. She said, how does this compare to, VPs in other groups and across genders? And I was extremely embarrassed to say I have no idea.
Yeah.
Because when I got the package, I looked at it and I said, wow, this is great. It's a nice increase. But I didn't seek to understand how it compares. So I said to her, I need to get back to you. Sure. And my embarrassment continued when I realized that actually she was at the very bottom. I brought it up, we changed it, we made it right. But she taught me that you can't just assume that someone else is looking that someone else is fighting on your behalf. And I'll tell you that since then, whether it's for myself personally or for someone on my team, I always ask the questions, because it first of all, it doesn't hurt to ask the question, but it's our own responsibility to do that.
Wow, that's it's interesting. We've got a program that we've been running, myself and Lisa Akerson. It's called Impactful Negotiation for Women, because we have a huge amount of data sets where we realize that women are not forthcoming asking for promotions.
Right.
They're certainly not forthcoming asking for salaries. And also, it's not just women as well, it's underrepresented groups. And I suppose my background's in enterprise sales, and this really struck me, but even people who sell for a living, when it comes to their own, they can close multi-million-pound deals, but when it comes to actually, I think it's a wider problem, if I could share this. I think employees are not very good at negotiating of any gender.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
And just amazing, Joe. I just love, and getting excited. We've got one coming up in May, and I'm really excited seeing the difference of people when they walk in the room to 2 days later when they walk out, what they think it's possible and authentic to ask for. We're not asking them to become something they're not.
Right. Yeah. And also having the confidence that, you're valuable and what you bring to the table is of value to the employee, to the employer.
Sure. What about we've mentioned the sort of the pay piece there, but what about the opportunity gap? Because it strikes me that they're linked in the sense that when you get to certain levels, whether it's VP, SVP, EVP, P, and then C-suites, the representation seems to get less and less, and by therefore definition, the earnings and the stock options and the equity and all those things get less and less. What are your views on trying to close that opportunity gap? Do you see it as a two-way street, or how do you see it?
I do see it as a two-way street. I spent nearly a dozen years at WEX where the CEO was a woman. I was really proud of that. She had many female leaders on her executive team. I always wanted that for myself. And I was lucky, again, at Marqeta to have other female leaders on an executive team. And now in the position at Just to be a female leader. I think it just has to be a conversation that whether it's with the CEO or a board or with an executive team, it's a conversation that needs to be open and like people need to be talking about that you want the diversity in leadership. And it's not really just men or women, it's just diversity generally. And you have to actually be deliberate in trying to build that way.
Okay. Do you think it helps to see it? Like you say, there were people at WEX on that leadership team and also with Marqeta. Did it help you actually seeing the C-suites with diversity in it?
100%. 100%. Yeah.
What's the business value to you of, it's one of my favorite topics, which is cognitive diversity, not just, because I think a lot of employers are now going down the route of let's tick the boxes, let's do demographics, etc. But actually cognitive diversity, what do you think of the actual business benefits to customers of cognitive diversity?
That's a really great question. I think that if you have a team that has the cognitive diversity to be pushing one another, to be challenging themselves, obviously in respectful ways, but really like that's how you grow. If not doing the same thing over and over again, and it's comfortable and it feels good for everyone in the room, but really sometimes, being active in that, that tension and wanting that tension, that's actually a really good thing.
Okay. And how can customers benefit from that tension? What does that mean to customer, either empathy or understanding that you could then make better products out of?
Yeah, I think just generally, when you have a company that's committed to diversity, that's committed to just being authentic in how you talk to one another. People talk about radical candor. While I like what radical candor might do, for me, it's more about like meaningful and thoughtful candor. But having the ability to speak openly, I think a customer benefits because that team is pushing each other to be better. And when we are better, we're bringing something better to market. We're servicing customers in a better way. So I think it's all related. And the healthier the teams, whether they're executive teams or leadership teams or just functional teams, the better for the customers.
Yeah, it's interesting that term there, radical candor. It doesn't quite sit. I like the emphasis of what it's trying to do, but I love the fact the meaningful or thoughtful candor. I think what precedes that is psychological safety.
Yes.
How important is psychological safety, and how do you create it? Because I see. So,
yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, I think it's of utmost importance. So if you're think about startups, and if you're in a space where you don't have psychological safety or safety generally, you never want to take a risk. Because if you take a risk and you fail, you're scared of what the outcome will be. But if you think about what we're building and what what people are trying to achieve and what tech is doing, if you don't take a risk, you will not get that reward. So by not creating that safety, you're really just kind of boxing people and their ideas in.
Yeah. And you say in the startup world, which is about pushing boundaries, creating something that's frictionless, etc. So if you were talking to a younger leader or a peer, what couple of first few steps would you say? Sorry, I see so many. I'm quite often brought in to try and help unsafe situations. What would be your first couple of steps to creating a culture where psychological safety exists?
Just talking about mistakes and talking about them openly without without finger pointing, about saying what we learn from this. People always talk about, okay, this occurred, let's do a post-mortem. Great. But what are we actually learning from that postmortem? What are we taking away to say we're not going to do this in the future because, if we do this, that happens? I just think being very transparent about not only success, but failures and talking about them and taking those learnings, that's what I'm constantly trying to do. In fact, we started a Slack channel recently. It's something that we did at Marqeta. It's something that now we've brought to Just. We made a mistake. This is what happened. Anyone can be on that Slack channel. It's really just a way of like, I learned this lesson. I'm telling you so that you could take that learning as well. And it's just kind of started to disarm people.
Sure. Do you think it helps when, I've seen this, when the senior leader does that as well? Or some of the senior leadership team and go, do you know what? Yeah, I could have done that better, etc.
Yeah, I think you have to start there, because if your senior leaders aren't willing to do it, no one else will.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we were talking earlier about showing up with all of the relationships in your life. It sounds like with your children, with your partner, with customers, with your team, authentically you. So who has been most influential to you becoming the authentic leader that you are today?
Yeah, so I've told you about my mom before, and she was the most authentic human I've ever known. So she's responsible for helping or kind of shaping the human that I am. I think that bleeds into who you become professionally. Obviously, I did have a boss that he was wonderful in the way that I would say to him, let me take this off your plate. I've not done it before. I'll ask you questions. Let me get it done. And he wouldn't bat an eye. He would always trust that I would take whatever it is that needed to be done and I would do it. We'd have conversations and he'd say, I really need to hire someone to do X, Y, and Z. And I say, well, what if we don't hire and let me take it? And yes, you may have to teach me some things, but I'm going to take it. And these are we talked about it earlier. These are kind of the experiences that I would kind of put myself in, because he would allow me to, and he would have trust that if I didn't know what to do, that I would come to him. These are the things that I think pretty much propelled me in my career to go from being an individual contributor to, focusing on relationships, to then, going into management, leading salespeople and continuing to grow. I definitely think he was very much, he gave me the confidence
Yeah.
to be the leader that I am. And I've told him that, so he knows it. But it also taught me that it's okay to fail. It's okay to not know. It's okay to ask questions
Yeah.
and to take things on that you've not done before.
Wow. I'm just hearing there that again, safety sounded really important there, yet also um, I have a belief that actually we all need, I'm not just saying this because I'm a coach, but I think we all need somebody who believes in us. And
Yep.
I've talked about my relationship with my mum as well. You know, she firmly believed that I could do things way beyond I thought were
Yep.
possible.
Yep.
And actually, it almost makes that void um, safe to step into. Did you feel that when you stepped into those uncomfort zones?
Definitely. But I would say to your point, that's why all of us need mentors. We need a safe place. We need someone who almost is like a neutral party that we can come to and say, here's this or here's that. And you can get feedback from someone who's
Yeah.
not in your day to day. I love mentorship programs. I think they're so valuable to companies, but I think they're really valuable just in general life.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's my biggest thrill as a coach when I see somebody and they say to me, I definitely couldn't do X. And then a few months later or 6 months later, they're not just doing X, they're beyond it. I just know there's something, that really helps me sleep well at night when that sort of thing happens. So that's a real thrill. Um, so what do you wish you knew? This is the 21-year-old question. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you were 21? Almost the advice you'd be giving to somebody, perhaps somebody young entering the payments industry now?
It's a good question. I may sound like a broken record, but I'll try to change it a little bit.
The
Um, I
answer's the
think,
answer. What you say doesn't matter.
yeah, I think humor and kindness go a really long way. And what I mean by that is humor is a really good tool to disarm people.
Yeah.
Like we talked about before, relationships and getting to know someone is a great way to start building rapport to get to know someone. I think
Mm.
humor can like accelerate it. Being kind, being authentic. I think that's how you garner respect over time. So it's one thing to go in and disarm and start building, but then how do you make that real over time? And that's kindness to me.
Mm.
It's not about who you know, but it's about the relationship that you have with those people.
Mm.
Um, I love that you said that, you heard that I'm a leader who leads with decency. Like to me, that's kind of that's a wonderful thing to hear because that means that someone out there I have a relationship with who felt strongly that they could say that.
Mm.
I'll tell you a story. This is something that we started to do at Marquetta, and I've taken it with me. Jason loved doing this in his
Mm.
team meetings, and it was starting with icebreakers.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, especially now in this still semi-virtual world,
Sure.
we don't know the people on the other side. And there was definitely humor and there was definitely kindness in those questions. Um, but as silly things like what's your favorite pizza topping, or where do you like to go on vacation, or what do you want to do when you retire? Like
Mm.
these are the little things that, if you take the time to do,
Mm.
they, you know, they pay back so much more than
Yeah.
you would
Yeah.
expect. So that I think that's what I would tell someone if they were just starting out.
Wonderful. I really love that because I know there's a real deep human need um, in everybody to be appreciated.
Mhm.
And there's a deep human need to be listened to.
Yes.
I've got this saying that I always say everybody needs a damn good listening to. Yep. And I
Mhm.
think particularly with COVID and those sort of things, but I love the sort of humor and kindness can be pretty disarming for building a relationship and getting connection. That's ultimately what we're talking about, and getting connection. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Wonderful. So look, this is the sort of time where I sort of try and summarize in sort of 2 or 3 points what you've said, but I think there's been many. So I wonder if I could just try and capture this and sort of summarize and synthesize, if that's okay. It struck
Yeah.
me first of all that actually the balance of how you show up in the world is across all of what's important to you, all the roles you have, from being a mother to being a leader to being the customer success, but all of those are how you show up. And and showing up as you just seems to be the most natural thing for you to do. The curiosity piece, it's lovely the way you broke down that definition about investigation as well as understanding and then synthesis, and saying actually that's what a leader does. So being curious about the people that you're actually managing and working with is key to the experience for them. And also I love the fact you said actually as a leader you do have a duty. You do have a duty to get to know your people and to look after them. The next piece for me was just about the gender pay gap and sort of seeing it as a two-way process. So a bit of a seminal experience there as you as the line manager experiencing and actually saying, actually, I don't know that data, but I need to find that data. But then what I love is the fact you then went, actually, this is a wake-up call. I'm going to advocate for others moving forward. And then the key part about empathy and how important empathy is not just for any relationship, but combining that with candor that's meaningful, yet starting with psychological safety, because it sounds like you've been the beneficiary of you growing with psychological safety. And I love the point you make around startups as well, because we're ultimately in the payment space. And if we're not going to make mistakes, well, we're going to actually have an impact on the bottom line and top line, because we're not going to achieve what any level of investors want us to. And that final piece then, a very human one, saying actually humor and actually kindness can go a long way to actually building better teams and a nicer way of doing business.
I think that is perfect. That's a good summary.
Brilliant. So, okay, well, I'm glad I captured all of that. Are there any sort of final words you wanted to share with us, or any pieces that you'd like to finally share with the audience before we wrap up?
I don't think so. This was actually super fun.
Good.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who I'm going to suggest you speak with next.
Yeah, wonderful. So that's my next question. But just on that point, actually, you can probably tell I love doing these because I'm just, I am curious. My wife would say I'm nosy. I just get the chance to interview great people who do great things in the payments industry and just share their experience. And I just learn every time we do one of these. And then hopefully others can as well. So I don't see any part of that that's not fun. So
good. Well, I'll be thinking about it. Thank you again.
Well, look, thank you very much indeed for sharing everything with me, and I'm sure that there's lots of insights there for people. So really appreciate it.
Good, thank you.